Today's guest is someone who's redefining what it means to build culture through space, sound, and experience. Josh Wyatt is the CEO of Avant Gardner and Brooklyn Mirage, the iconic music venue and cultural epicenter that's become one of the most talked about nightlife destinations in the world. But Josh's journey didn't start in dance music. He's a serial entrepreneur and a visionary operator, known for building brands that blend art, lifestyle, and community. From helping launch Generator Hostels into a global hospitality brand to leading Equinox Hotels and reimagining what luxury wellness travel looks like, Josh brings a rare combination of creative instinct and business acumen. And in this conversation, we dive into how he sees the future of culture, the science of designing unforgettable spaces, and why authenticity is a true currency in an experience driven world. I'm excited to have Josh today on Magnetic. But yeah, Josh, I think you have an incredible background. Just a little bit non-linear in the different types of companies you've touched, from mass appeal connection to even like luxury wellness and all that. But let's start with your personal narrative. I'd love to understand a bit about you and kind of what brought you here to the epicenter of art, culture, and hospitality in New York today.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
And really, really honored to play a part in talking through some hopefully pretty epic and fun and interesting stories today. So, I've always been motivated and inspired by bringing people together. That's been my narrative throughout my life, and I think part of that desire is leaning into certain personal narratives. And I think when you think about your own career or entrepreneurial ventures, sometimes it's really important to let those personal narratives actually drive you and motivate you and inspire you, because those narratives can help make the difference between success and failure when you're in those dark moments of
Mm.
having to raise capital or having to close that client or having to get that product to market. So at a very early age, from a professional perspective, let's call my early 20s, I made the decision to lean into my personal narrative. And that personal narrative was growing up from a position of a difficult childhood and not really having any type of resources financially, professionally, um, you know, very few, if any, mentors in my teen years and early 20s, and then losing my parents when I was 19. And, once I lost my parents, that put me in a very lonely space. And so I remember probably a week after or so, sort of squaring my shoulders, looking at myself in the mirror and saying, you have two paths in life right now. You have a path of self pity, of defeatism, of making excuses,
Mm.
or you have and of being alone, or you have a path of this incredible opportunity that's opened up for you where you can really do anything because you're playing with house money at that point. And that house money narrative where you're like, look, I may succeed or fail, but I'm going to use the lessons that I've been taught in my life. I'm going to use some of the challenges, but also some of the good moments. And I'm going to lean into what makes me happy or what really pushes me. And I'm going to try to create a career around that. So that's really what I did in my early 20s. It took me a while to get there, obviously, but
Yeah.
I knew deep down that at that moment that I wanted to bring people together. And that obviously has manifested itself into the world of hospitality.
Yeah. That's incredible. And when you say bring people together, what is, I'm sure that's passion fueled from the inside, right? Like it gives you a natural high, it gives you joy and delightment to see bringing people together. When did you get to start first experiencing that? Was it through professional career paths, or was it something that socially and on the side you were like hosting things, bringing people together? How did that manifest into reality there for you?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what drove me, but I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so after I graduated college in my early 20s, after a year or two of traditional, working for a large corporation, traditional training, I launched my own small technology company with three other partners, and um, that business was successful within the construct of being a relatively small SaaS business. Um, and during running that company, I was on the road all the time. So I was in my mid 20s. I didn't have an apartment. I was staying in a hotel for 52 weeks a year for probably 3 years straight, traveling around the United States. So I got to know hotels just by being a
Mm.
customer. And at the time, you know, I had time on my hands on the weekends. And so I wanted to sort of be, again, I wanted to put myself into the mix. I wanted to be around people and trends that were interesting. This is, sort of mid to late 90s. And I'll never forget it. I remember I was in South Beach, Miami, which was definitely not what it is today. It was a much more wild and frankly smaller situation than where it is today, sort of the epicenter of everything. And I'll never forget, I think it was probably like 1998 or 99, like walking into the lobby of the Delano, which was designed by Philippe
Yeah.
Stark and Ian Schrager, when it was really had never been done before in the United States, that incredible billowing curtains, these huge columns, the way that every detail that Philippe Stark had designed that lobby, and just the bringing together of sight, sound, music, people, and culture into that lobby. And I mean, I know now that sounds like, hey, it's been done thousands of times, but you have to understand and appreciate back then it had never been done before. And to Ian Schrager's credit, who I look to as I wouldn't say a mentor. I mean, I know Ian not well, but I've certainly interacted with him, and he's someone that has always inspired me in
Yeah,
terms of
aspirational. Yeah.
constantly innovating and like constantly moving forward. So from that moment on, I'm like, I want to be a hotelier, and then it took me a while, but again, late 90s, but I started to study the greats. I studied Ian, I studied and ended up actually spending a lot of time with Andre Balaz, and study what Barry Sternlicht was doing as well on the capital side.
Mm.
And so, really trying to understand how capital, culture, trend, and design comes together, those four pillars, all wrapped within the circle of hospitality. That's what I just studied from afar as a customer or a consumer for 3 or 4 years. And then I had the opportunity when I went to business school. I went to HBS and graduated in 2005. Unlike a lot of people who go to business school and sort of take 2 years to find themselves, I knew day one I was going to go into hospitality. I literally, like, there was no hesitation. I'm like, now I've been able to achieve, I was able to sell my company and achieve an exit, which got me into HBS and paid for HBS and allowed me to, establish a nice place in New York City as well. And that gave me the grounding and the footing to then propel myself into this very focused path into hospitality.
How does Generator Hostels? Is that the big step you took? Was that
Yeah.
prior to what you just said or
Yeah,
right
no, that was
after?
right after. So,
That's right.
yeah, so Generator, so, it's funny. Going back to the names I just referenced, right? The sort of the hospitality
Yeah.
innovators and pioneers, really the greats, the Ians, the Barrys, the Andres, the Sean McPhersons. I studied all those people, and again, similar story. Like, squared myself in the mirror, looked at myself in the mirror, and said, I want to be like those guys, but I got some problems. Number one, I'm not nearly connected enough. I've not been
Mm.
operating in any of these cities globally ever. I have no experience
And you
whatsoever.
think that's obviously a key fundamental to have in this space, right?
Absolutely.
To
Like,
be connected.
you have to have a network, you have to be a
Yeah.
connector, you have to have sort of been in the scene to understand, who the movers and shakers are. I had none of that. I mean, I just graduated from HBS. This is 2005. So I said, well, I don't have the network. I don't have the money. I mean, yes, I had sold a company, but it was by no means like any type of like world changing exit. So I didn't have the money, I didn't have the capital, and I didn't have the experience. So, those three things are deeply important to be successful in anything you do. So I'm like, how am I going to do that? And that's really the first moment that I was lucky enough to surround myself with people, and in this case, one individual who really believed in me,
Mm.
a gentleman by the name of Keith Breslauer, who's the founding partner of Patron Capital, which was my first job out of Harvard Business School. Uh, and I looked at what Keith had been able to do in the space, which was to own some really incredible hotels over in Europe. And I was lucky enough to meet him through an HBS class. And I walked up to him and I said, Keith, I don't know you. I have no experience, but I see the hotels that you own and you operate, and I want to be like you. What can I do to work for you? And he looked at me and said, well, I don't really like to hire anyone from HBS. He's like, I'm a University of Chicago guy, so good luck, kid. I'm like, Keith, I'm going to be in London like 2 months from now. Like, I'd love to have a coffee with you. That was not true, by the way. I just, on the spot, I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
flying to London. I got to meet this guy. So he's like, well, I probably won't take a meeting with you, but if you happen to be in London, like, drop by, and that's, I mean, again, I basically bird dog that relationship. I got on a plane, on my own dime. I flew over. I was able to get a meeting with Keith, and I said, Keith, like, I'll work for free. Now, I didn't have the money to be able to really say that, even though I had my exit. Like, I'd burned through a lot of money at HBS, and it's not cheap to basically be unemployed for 2 years. But I took the risk on myself. I bet on myself, and I said, "Look, Keith,
Yeah.
I'm going to work for free for you," which was not completely the end result. I mean, he obviously paid me, but a very sort of entry level salary. And from that point on, he allowed me to innovate within the fund. And again, the learning point here is what was able to happen there. One, I mentioned earlier, I didn't have the network, I didn't have the
Yep.
capital. Well, I now just solved two of those issues, right? I now have a mentor that believes in me and was willing to give me enough rope to like go out and like really chase opportunity. And I aligned myself with capital. And I was trained in that world of capital as well. So it wasn't just being able to say, hey, I want to be a hotelier, I'm going to work in a hotel. It was actually going in the other way and saying, hey, let me start to surround myself with world class intellect, world class leadership, people who also have a Rolodex, who are kind and supportive enough to give me access to some of that Rolodex. And number two, people who have access to capital. I was able to solve those two things, and then I was able to innovate within. So I looked around and I said, okay, I don't have what Ian, Andre, and Barry have, but I'm now starting to solve some problems here, right? I got my capital and I have my mentor. Now let's innovate. And then I looked around and said, it'd take 20 years to build what Ian has done, or 20 years, maybe 30 years, what Andre's done. Let's just be inspired by it, but bring it down to an industry that's never been touched by
Mm.
design. And that was hostels. So I looked around at everything. And I said, why would I want to go up against a
The big
five-star,
guys.
four-star, the big
Yeah.
guys? No one's looking in this space. Let's go be inspired by all the great things that are happening at this peak level of hospitality, but bring it down to the masses, which at the time was, now it's Gen Z, but at the time was the term millennial had just started.
Yeah.
But remember, Facebook was just getting going. Instagram didn't exist when this concept was started. So I had this feeling, I'm like, I come from a poor background. I'm American. I didn't leave the United States until I was 19, right? Just like a lot of Americans.
Yep.
But wouldn't it be amazing, even though I'm spending $10, $20 a night, €20 a night, wouldn't it be amazing to have the same experience that I, Josh Wyatt, had had walking into that Philippe Stark design lobby by, the great Ian Schrager? Let's see if we can do that to the masses, because most people don't have the budget or the opportunity to get on a plane and go to South Beach, or to go to Hotel Coste in Paris, or go to Milan Fashion Week, or be invited to the Boom Boom Room by Andre.
Yeah.
Let's be honest about that. Most people don't have that access. But let's position it from a sense of sort of authenticity and kindness to say, hey, let's bring this out to the masses. And that's what we did.
When you
So
say bring it out to the masses, obviously you can't bring out the physical luxury component because that just costs money. Is it more so, was it the community? Was it the access? What were you bringing down to
we were bringing
the masses?
design, culture,
Design.
art, and
Okay.
music curation down to the hostel space.
Yep.
So instead of having to spend €500 a night in hotel cost and trying to fight your way to get a reservation, you could spend €30 a night at Generator Paris. You could go in and have an incredible nightclub experience curated by great DJs, and you could walk in and see art that, yes, maybe is not, $100,000 for
Sure.
a picture,
Yeah.
but it's an up and coming artist. And so we took all
That
the
is really cool.
inspiration,
Yeah.
from these sort of hospitality curators, and we brought it down to the hostel space. And I was lucky enough, again, this narrative thread of surrounding myself with people that believe in me, or people that want to take a risk on me. I was able to surround myself with, in particular, this one design group called Design Agency, Anwar Makayesh, who became a real partner to me. He and I really built this great partnership, just like Ian and Philippe Stark had done, where we were able to create, one after the other, these great generator properties all around Europe. And again, it was following passion. So, at the opening part of this discussion, we talked about, what can you do from a personal perspective to fuel your professional success? One thing I loved doing was just getting on a train and going around to European capital cities. So I figured, hey, maybe using your own customer data or your own sense of what a customer is can be dangerous sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
because there's inherent biases in how you operate and how you view a market. But I do believe in myself and I believe in my instincts. And so my instinct was there are beautiful historic buildings all around Europe. And the millennials at the time, or now Gen Zs, they want to get on a train and go from city to city and experience culture and design. But they may not have a ton of capital, a ton of money in their pocket. But if we can deliver that experience to them for 30, 40, 50 euros a night, which would include being able to stay there and have a couple drinks and go to a party and, hear an emerging DJ, let's see if we can accomplish that. So it wasn't, we did the data, we did the work to be clear, in terms of underwriting everything.
Yep.
But more importantly, I spent literally, cumulatively, probably years on the road, just
Yep.
going from city to city, like learning each micro neighborhood, learning the buildings, understanding the history and culture of those cities, and then like lasering in on historic buildings and buying those
Yeah.
buildings with the capital from Patron Capital.
It's so incredible to hear you say that. And maybe it's because I can actually relate from a passion standpoint of I truly think you have to embody, like physically embody your passion. And so if you're not becoming your core customer, it's really hard to I think you said it earlier, that you could just study at any university, whatever, and understand the theory behind hospitality, or in my world, the theory behind consumer brands. And if I've never been to a Target before, or Walmart, or an Erewhon, and stood there and really understood the psychology of the customer and all of their pain points, and similar to you, I've been in a very grateful position at, a platform to be able to travel to these amazing cities, and luckily stay at, higher class hotels to understand what true hospitality feels like, and what care. I mean, our internal slogan is "Who cares wins,"
Hmm. I
right?
love that. That's a great slogan,
Which is,
actually.
yeah,
It's fantastic.
which is a transition away from just this hustle culture of just working hard and overtime and being in the hamster wheel, right? And I think when you become your customer, you just understand what it means to care for them. And without that, I don't even think the passion you had in going into a conversation with some of your mentors, I don't even think that would have translated as well unless they understood that you actually cared, right? And I think
Yeah,
that's a big
I
difference.
think that word care is important because it means so many different things, right? It means caring about an outcome. It means caring about people. It means caring about a market. It means caring about a community. And if you can bring those types of perspectives in, again, you know, I would say any outcome is going to be a better outcome than if you don't care. If you're just purely robotic about it, the outcome may or may not be great, but I think if you have that extra level of like sort of moral compass around the sense of really caring for that outcome and caring for the constituents that you're touching is important.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I love that was part of your sort of fundamental thesis around the professional advice. How does generator translate into your next stepping stone?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think life in general, for anyone out there listening and thinking about stepping stones, I don't know if I've ever had like a grand plan other than to say I've always been inspired by my life as a series of chapters in a book. So I'm not a serial entrepreneur in the sense of doing, 20 different things. Like, there are some people out there that have, they're sitting on 6 boards and they've launched 10 companies, and that's great. That's fine. That's not how my brain works. I'm a very sort of methodical person. I like deep, long chapters. So,
Hmm.
really sinking my teeth into an opportunity and seeing it from start to finish, or from start until handoff, let's say, till it's ready to be handed off to the next iteration of what it's going to become. So Generator was a long journey. I mean, it was a decade-long journey, really start to
Wow.
finish. We achieved, basically a $500 million exit. So the various investors across the cap table earned a good return. And the company today, is succeeding deeply. And I think it's for sale again for like 750 million euros. So, that's a great success in terms of longevity. The fact that the company is still around nearly 20 years later and doing quite well, I think is a mark of, having built something sustainable.
Yep.
Um, and that was a chapter in time, that was in my 30s. And then as I started to evolve, to your point about knowing the customer, I'd always been an athlete, as part of like a charity thing for Generator in 2015. I ran a marathon every generator city in Europe. So I mean, I ran 3 marathons in 1 month. Like I just went from each city. So it was like 10 marathons in 1 year.
Wow.
And, again, this narrative of being maybe lucky, a little bit like being prepared as well. I had the chance to meet Harvey Spivak, who at the time was CEO, and now he's chairman of Equinox Holdings. And he had come up with this great vision to expand Equinox from its platform at the time, which was Equinox. They had acquired SoulCycle, and they were looking to expand into other businesses that were really aligned with what they were trying to achieve, which was this 360 lifestyle of high performance. And looking at, again, this concept of like innovation within hospitality and bringing people together. Generator was much more social and culture driven. Equinox, bringing people together, is much more wellness and high
Mm-hmm.
performance individual driven. But, I think certainly today, I think it's by far actually the most successful membership community business in the United States. If you think about it,
Yep.
it just may look a little different from the quote unquote membership club or subscription business, but it's an extraordinarily successful business today. And back then it was just hitting its peak, and now it's just gone from peak to peak. So, again, trying to surround myself with really inspiring and frankly just super high performance people that are smarter and better than me because they inspire me. And like I'm working up to that level every time that I'm surrounding myself with someone who is just a legend in the industry. And again, it's not um, any like, I don't know, focused effort. It just sort of
Yeah.
happens. But, it's something that I've always been inspired by, people that in a way sort of drive me to push myself to be better and better, and that was Equinox and Harvey. And I spent a year working on the hotel there and, really learning, that it again, at the time after the generator exit, having, a good decade of success and, having exited in my 20s a company and gone to HBS, you would think, hey, in your 40s, you're coasting a little bit, you're feeling successful. But I looked at it from a different perspective, which is you should always be learning. You should
Mm-hmm.
always make yourself a little nervous, just a little uneven, if you will, intellectually, because that vibrational inequality as you approach things makes you better, right?
Yep.
It makes you that nervousness, like in a situation where you may not really know how to do something, will only make you better. So again, that was just that narrative, like moving on. I'd never built or been a part of a team or a multi-billion-dollar construction project. I'd done big buildings before, but
Yep.
Hudson Yards and Equinox was like a whole nother level. So being able to work with, those incredible minds and being inspired and learning and sort of being nervous was something that was deeply value enhancing to me from a career perspective.
And how did that transition into NeueHouse? Was
Into
that
NeueHouse, yeah.
NeueHouse?
So,
Okay.
I think, uh, you know, it's important in everyone's career to also look yourself in the mirror and make sure you're calibrated in the right way, right? So there are structures or organizations sometimes where it may not be the right fit in terms of what your creative force is or what style of leadership you want to bring to the table. And I think from that perspective, I've always been pretty self-aware. And, after some time at Equinox, it just dawned on me that I wanted to have my own path, right? And I mean, sort of, if you think about Equinox and related, it's like a room of legends, like, or a building of legends. Like everyone there is just like world-class legendary. And, I wanted to sort of set my own course, if you will. So NeueHouse was an interesting one. I came across it. It was co-owned by Barry Diller's family office and the Low family, which is a Hong Kong billionaire family. Again, putting myself in the mix of interesting, well capitalized, and legendary investors, and or groups that are affiliated with legendary investors, I think was an important thing.
Yeah, it feels like that's the string here.
That's the
Yeah.
string, and again, it sort of makes you a little bit nervous, right? It's like, okay, uh, Barry Diller, another legend in the
Mhm.
industry, legendary from many, many different perspectives. Certainly a legendary New Yorker, and being able to impact the city the way he has from a physical perspective, from a charitable perspective, and looking at that narrative thread that he has of being around companies that have pushed the boundaries and really pushed how business is being done. So NeueHouse is an interesting one, a deeply creative community with a really strong thread of hospitality. No hotels, right? But what drew me to that was, again, the high performance individuals involved with that
Mhm.
company, the Barry Diller family office, the Lowe family, the founders of NeueHouse, Alan Murray, Joshua Abram. They are, again, really interesting, dynamic, creative people. They had left the company by that point, so the company was a little rudderless, but it had this DNA of community and it had a DNA of creativity. So that's what drew me to NeueHouse, coming in as a turnaround CEO in that situation, where the DNA of the brand had a great DNA. It just needed a little bit of structure and
Yep.
leadership, um, and and really a vision, right? I mean, I think any great creative company needs, to your earlier point, like needs a vision, and typically the CEO or the founder or the management team should embody that vision.
Yeah.
You should, as you get to that level where you are trying to galvanize a community, you're trying to galvanize a customer base, you have to really, I think, live the brand in some level,
Yeah, embody it.
and you have to embody it. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think you necessarily have to be the face of the business, to be clear. Like, there's a time to be a face of a business and a time not to be a face of the
Mm.
business. And that's a really interesting debate that I think every founder and CEO should have with them.
Especially now where there's so much pressure to be online,
Yeah, I
publicly
mean,
facing, create your you're the Jake of State Farm, right, as a CEO
yeah.
sometimes, and so
And there's risks and benefits to that, but I think every founder and CEO and/or partners or management teams should have open discussions about that. They should talk to their board about it. Like, you can get out of whack pretty quickly sometimes with different agendas and
yeah,
egos and whatnot. However, all that said, in hospitality, you are effectively selling an experience and an emotion. And so
mhm,
it may not have to be one person per se, but I do think that the management team at the very least should embody what that brand ethos
yeah,
is. And I think NeueHouse, when I became involved with it, really lacked. It was rudderless. It lacked that cohesive vision after the founders had left, and so I got involved and and became CEO, and went through this turnaround, where we again were able to really take the incredible DNA that had been started by the founders and by other both employees and members within the platform, and we were able to expand it out. And I remember I called Harvey and I'm like, Harvey, what would you do in this situation? You have a company that's sort of impaired financially. It was quite frankly a disaster. It had two properties. This was in the time of like peak scaling, like
yeah.
mass. It was
It's LA, right?
SoftBank,
Yeah,
WeWork, all this crazy. Like people were doing like we're going to do 100 of this, 100 of that. NeueHouse was New York and Madison Park and 25th and Madison Square Park and in Hollywood in the
yeah,
old
yeah,
old CBS broadcasting studios, two really iconic buildings, but it had sort of stalled out, right? And the previous board and the founders and there was, I think they cycled through a couple CEOs. There were press releases saying we're going to do 20 Noy houses by 2020. This is 2017. And I called Harvey. I'm like, Harvey, what would you do here? He's like, how about you do two new Noy houses? Just do two. He's like, you'll
mm,
be good. Like focus on steady execution, one foot in front of the other, right? And again, that's how I did Generator. Like, people were putting out press releases all the time saying we're going to do 50 hotels or
yeah,
100 hotels. I'm like, we did 14 incredible hotels that today, or hostels that today are still cranking along, and they're beautifully designed and they've stood the test of time. So I took that methodology to NeueHouse, which was like build really good quality foundation.
yeah,
We did two. We did one in downtown in the Bradbury building, which was where Blade Runner was filmed, like incredible, iconic building. And then we did one in Venice Beach, which was this 1930s historic building where actually Snapchat was like founded on that street. So Evan Spiegel and his whole team had taken over all these historic buildings. It sort of got a little bit like teched out on that street. And so the community and the community board were looking for culture curators to come in. So we found
Mm.
this incredible historic building. Tony Bill, who was the owner and the landlord, was a Academy Award-winning producer. He had produced The Sting and The Natural with Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Again, this confluence of putting myself and the company in the
The
mix with
intersection. Yeah.
intersection of culture creators and just really good people, good capital. We brought in Gaw Capital as a additional investor, Goodwin Gaw, who's another legendary investor, and we just tried to surround ourselves with really interesting, smart people. And the story was great until COVID,
Until COVID.
and then
Yeah.
we hit the
Yeah.
wall like a freight train going, like 100 miles an hour. It completely COVID just obliterated the company, to be honest.
Yeah.
And we were left with very little choice. I mean, when you're in the middle of massive capex, a big turnaround, we opened NeueHouse Bradbury on January 28th of 2020 in downtown
Jeez.
LA. Like a really, really, really bad timing.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
closed 3 weeks later. So, again, but that was a life lesson, right? Which is, okay, you have a pandemic that hits you, really just completely obliterated the
Yeah.
company, and we had to make really fast choices, which impacted capital, impacted people, and impacted the membership community. And I remember sitting there again. It was one of those like square the shoulders moments, right? Like maybe every 5 or 10 years, you have these like really important moments in your life. It could be personal or professional, but I would say for anyone listening, like lean into those moments. Like
You
when
have to be
you're
self-aware too, which I feel like you very much are
be
for those
self-aware,
moments.
lean into it and be like, hey, this is a moment where there's a real opportunity or a real risk, and like
Yeah.
discuss it with yourself, discuss it, if you're married or in a relationship, discuss it with your partner, or if you're in a tight business relationship, discuss it with your business partner, and like lean into it and say, okay, like let's really game it out. Like what happens here? We at the time, NeueHouse was looking at a hard Chapter 7. We were going to run out of money. The PPP money would not have saved the company. And I took a view. I'm like, I do not want to be a Chapter 7 CEO. I will sacrifice my own economics. I got completely wiped out from a personal perspective. And I went out and I, I raised capital, from, this crazy billionaire in Germany that no one had ever met. No one knew who he was. We couldn't KYC him, but we said, hey, this will give a lifeline to the company. We're going to save 250 jobs.
Mhm.
Yes, it was going to be totally suboptimal for the shareholders, but we were able to save the company and we were able to move on from that. And that was a moment that I'm very proud of looking back on. I sacrificed everything. I
Yeah.
sacrificed everything except my reputation, but my personal economics were totally
Which is the
destroyed.
one thing you really can't get
But
back,
yeah,
or
you
way
can't.
harder to get back.
Reputation and people at the time probably don't realize it, but saving all those jobs, yes, we had to let some people go, but saving all those jobs, making the landlords whole, paying people on time, going through the vendor stack. I mean, personally went through probably, I think we had 780 vendors. We didn't have a CFO at the time. So I went through all those vendors and like personally negotiated with them. And it taught me a lot. Again, I was nervous. I was
Mhm.
unsteady. I woke up every morning not knowing what to do. It was a new frontier, but I leaned into it, and it made me better. It prepared me for the role that I have today, which, obviously completely different situation, but a lot of the skill sets that I picked up during that time really have allowed me to be a better leader and just an overall better manager of situations and of relationships and people going into
It
today.
Yeah, and what an incredible, so you kinda went from this startup to global conglomerate back to what I would consider more of like a magnetic growth era, which is execute and build in 1 or 2 locations and allow people to come to you. Um, you've mentioned a ton of really awesome things. I think the one thing I wanna stick on is that every gig that you've had, it sounds like once you're deep into it, you just have to deal as a leader just operationally and all these unique things that come at your way that you just don't understand when you're doing for the first time. How do you kind of create space for where you kind of started this conversation around passion and vision and the care of connecting people when you're in roles that requires so much energy and time blocking and tackling, operating, because you've been the CEO for most of these roles, not just a CMO or
Mhm.
a CGO or a CFO where you're just focused on one lane. How do you create space for that vision that I feel like you truly have, which is connecting people? And how do you allow that to seep through your day to day when so much time is being taken on? And I don't want to call it draining you because it's probably things that are impacting the business and pushing them forward. But I always say, hey, take inventory of how you feel at the end of the day, right? Were you drained or are you ready to go have an amazing dinner and be energized at the end of the day?
Yeah,
How do you create space for that?
that's a great question. Well, I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently. Whenever I get into a phase where it becomes overwhelming, where there's so many things coming at you, and maybe you get some bad news, like obviously pandemic is an easy example, but
Yeah,
there's more micro examples. I don't know, something doesn't go your way at the board, or
cranes are not working, whatever.
raining or whatever, the
Yeah.
high wind, which we we can talk about. But um, I always tried both for myself as a motivational tool, but also for the team. I try to take a pause. I'm like, all right, guys, I know we're in a little bit of a grind here, or we're in a phase where it's overwhelming or we're stressed out. Let's work back from the opening day. Let's remember that we are going to have this incredible opening on whatever day it's going to be.
Mm,
So let's take NeueHouse Venice Beach. All right, so that's a good example. And we'll
yeah,
talk. We'll
great
we'll
location.
we'll, we'll
Yeah.
come on to talk about Mirage and Avant Gardner. But whenever we would hit hurdles with construction or community board or whatever it is, I say, guys, we're building something that no one else has ever built in this community. And look at all the incredible artists that we have, and look at all the incredible design and the architectural provenance of what we're bringing to the market. So yes, we've hit this hurdle, but let's just take a pause and remember that we're part of something truly special. And you can look back in your career and tell yourself or tell your family or your kids or your partner that you were a part of this. And that's what helps me to really motivate myself when I go
Mm,
through certain wobbles, and helps me to motivate the team. And I think if you can constantly communicate that vision to the team, and then out to the marketplace, and if you do it with a sense of authenticity, we say, look, like we're trying our best here, like we really are trying to innovate. We're trying to do something for the community, for the customers, for the local community where people live, to make it better. That is what really allows us, I think, to create this high performance environment. And you see that that is a commonality amongst all great companies or all great products or leaders. Like they truly are looking for greatness in what they do inside of their own company. And they want that impact of the company to have a positive influence on the people that work for it and on
mm,
the community that it operates within. So that is what drives me. And that is how I try to communicate that out to the teams or to the customers. I've been part of situations where, something doesn't go right with the customer base. Like you have a service failure. Again, it's sort of owning it and communicating it effectively. But, it's never easy. I think being CEO, everyone always guns for the title. I want the title of CEO.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're younger, like it might give you some type of like ego or emotional boost, but you'll find, after you've been in that seat, once, twice, like you'll find that the title doesn't matter really. What matters is the obligation and the duty and responsibility that you put on your shoulders, um, to really bring success to the constituents that are a part of the journey that you're on. And that
Mm.
means employees, customers, community, vendors, and capital. You hit all those five things. I wake up every morning, those are my five things I think about when I think
That's
about the company,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
Those five constituents, it's like a Venn diagram,
Yeah.
like, but with five bubbles. And I have an obligation, I have a fiduciary responsibility, and I have a reputational responsibility to all those parts, or all those groups. And you know, it's sort of how I manage my life when I think about my role.
Do you usually give yourself on a more micro level on a day to day basis? You talk about, hey, maybe that's your North Star when you get overwhelmed. It's like, hey, am I really looking at all these five parties as I think about the decisions for the day? Do you give yourself space in order to continue to think about vision and breaking molds and all that? Or are you mostly, you have a method to the madness every day and it's like, fully calendared out? How are you giving
Yeah,
yourself
no,
that
I
creative
do. Yeah, I mean,
space?
again, I learned this I looked at, a couple of the mentors I mentioned earlier on in our discussion, the Keith Breslauers of the world, Harvey Spivak. They've found this balance between high performance, but also creating personal success,
Mm.
right? Maybe it's like the XY axis of like style and substance,
Yeah.
You got to have some style out there, I think, to really, especially in hospitality, and just emotionally and personally, I think style is always important. Um, and then substance. So if you can find that like XY axis and that balance of style and substance as a leader, I think that's really important. For me, it's waking up and being pretty regimented, like staying in shape is really important, and like carving out like those, that sort of 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. is like sacrosanct for me. Like,
Mm.
I make sure that I'm not scheduling meetings then, and I try not to let work, even if it's been a great day or a bad day the day before, it's getting up and really creating that time. It's also focusing on, I look at, again, I try to study people that have found that balance between super high performance, but also they just seem like really nice people. Roger Federer is a good example. In his speech he gave at Dartmouth, the commencement speech, he talks about the fact that, he's arguably, the best tennis player, one of the top three best tennis players in history. He won 54% of his points. Think about that. So he failed 46% of the time.
Yeah.
But he talked about how he would lose a point and then he just focus on the next point,
Yeah.
and all you can do is
Next play mentality.
next play mentality,
Yeah.
put in the work, create that foundation. So for me, it's being physically healthy. I'm 51 years old, and I'm almost 52, and I still feel like I have that high performance physical mentality where I can still compete as a much younger man, and I think
Yeah.
that's really important, trying to
And
stay
a lot of the
healthy.
guys I know, that we were all hanging
Yeah,
out, they all have that same high
yeah,
performance mentality.
absolutely.
And I think it's the other thing you mentioned is like staying as curious as a child. Like I have a 5-year-old and some of the fucking questions he asks me, I'm like, wow, I should be thinking about
Yeah.
the same thing. Like
It,
why
you,
why is this done that way?
Stay
And like breaking
curious.
the mold.
I know it's a little bit of cliche, but stay curious. Push yourself. I call it like the good nervousness, like
Yeah.
not the nervousness, not anxiety. That's a negative word,
Yeah,
but
yeah, absolutely.
this positive nervousness, like a little bit of the butterflies in the stomach when you're walking into an intellectual situation or a physical situation, like change. They always talk about like changing up your training routine, like doing something that makes your body physiologically nervous
Yeah.
makes it stronger. It's the same thing with running a business, like being a little bit nervous out there as a leader, being a little bit nervous as a company, doing things that bring the company forward to innovate. And yes, you will fail in some of those initiatives, but if you can learn from those failures and really legislate for them, the company will be better, and the team will get better, and the people will, maybe deep down, maybe not in the moment, but deep down they'll appreciate the fact that the company took that risk on them, and the company took that risk on a new product so that we could get new customers and new
That's how you
experiences.
disrupt.
It's disrupt, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of disrupt, Brooklyn Mirage.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about it.
It's single-handedly the most explosively creative product I've ever worked with, and I have the honor and the pleasure, of working with the team and with the founder, Billy Bildstein, who's the founder, and the creative director of the company, and really the creative force behind what you see in the renders, and
Mhm.
what the company is delivering. Um, I mean, it's truly stunning what is being built right now, and a lot of people don't understand it, but hopefully they will once we get it open, which I know is 5.5 weeks from now. So
Yeah.
every day counts, but again, it's a huge risk on many levels. It's never been done before the way this is being built, and if you look at it from the outside looking in, there are a lot of questions that even like our customers and fans, they're trying to figure it out. Like if you go on Reddit, which may or may not be a good thing as CEO, but if you read Reddit, like a lot of people don't understand how it's being built, right? So it's quite interesting, and sometimes entertaining to get the fan feedback. But what Billy and the engineers and the architects, both uh, of whom are based both in Europe and the United States, what they've been able to do with prefab, modular construction, um, is really one of a kind, and I think it will revolutionize how people look at venues and how venues are built.
Mm. That process, just from a rendering standpoint, is incredible, and I'm sure as we see it open up, it's gonna be awesome. I can't wait to go.
Yeah.
Um, your role in this, what's the vision here? Because you're at the precipice of this taking off. Like, what
Yeah, I mean,
you've had all these chapters, and now with Brooklyn Mirage, given the excitement of this, different, sort of different in the music space, I guess, but still very much hospitality.
yeah, I mean, look,
What
it's why was I attracted to this role? So I started about 6 months ago. Again, I came in as a turnaround CEO. So I think oftentimes there are these companies, there's a lot of similarities to NeueHouse, where you have a really, again, explosively creative founder, visionary. That creative force oftentimes doesn't have the bandwidth to do everything. I mean, just no human being
Yeah.
can, right? And so if you look throughout the history of great hospitality companies, or great product companies, there's usually two or three people that are working together, right? So let's take fashion. Tom Ford and Dominic DeSole, right? Like for Tom Ford to become who he became, he needed a Dominic
Yeah.
DeSole, right? Um, so there's these moments where maybe it's like a movie director pairs up with a producer, right? Or a great fashion designer pairs up with a great executive, um, or even like an athlete who is really great, but he hasn't won the championship and he gets that great coach. That's sort of how I view my role in this situation. So in this particular role, I'm less on the immediate forefront of the design and the curation of the
Mm,
product. I mean, with Generator and NeueHouse, and when I ran Fotografisco, which is the photography museum, and Chapel Bar and Veronica, I was at the forefront of designing those experiences. Here, I view myself more as a producer and a supporter, if you will,
I
of the
see.
creatives,
Yeah.
right? And really shepherding the process from a structural
Make sure it actually
perspective
comes to life.
to make sure it comes to
Yeah.
life. So to allow and to nurture Billy and Hard Feelings, which is our graphic studio who's been working on the renders with Billy, to sort of provide the cover, if you will, almost like I always
The
sort of
umbrella.
joke about. I'm almost like an umbrella, right?
Umbrella.
Like an
Yeah.
umbrella
It's
protecting, raising the capital, dealing with the
making sure it can grow
making sure it can
without
grow, and trying to
external
give enough
conflict.
enough oxygen so that the creatives can really come to life. And the same thing goes for the music side of it, which is, we have the best show calendar, I think, in the United States. We've come back from what was a challenging 2023 and 2024, where the venue suffered various issues. There were some security concerns, there was crowd safety, there was other items that were suboptimal. There was there was a festival called Electric Zoo. I mean, this
Yeah.
is all in the press, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about it. But there were suboptimal outcomes that really sort of were an albatross on the company, and it was dragging the company, and it was not allowing the company to innovate. So, I was hired to come in to really address those situations, which we addressed head on immediately, transparently, communicated, made people whole on the vendor side, with Izu, made fans whole by refunding tickets, and then really looking at the whole experience at Avant Gardner, which is the parent company and the campus
To Brooklyn Mirage.
of
Yeah.
what we operate, and then the Mirage is one of three venues inside of that, and really designing a product that I think speaks to incredible curation, incredible music technology, and technology and production values, but at the same time, a great fan experience.
Mm.
So that intersection of community, hospitality, and world class production, and really addressing what the musicians and the artists need when they're up on stage and when they're backstage, and then addressing what the fans want and need, which means more room to dance, access to all these different hospitality experiences, a safe arrival and departure, and really strong, clear communication from the company to the fans as to what they can expect when they show up. And that's what we've been able to accomplish in the last 6 months. So we're in the home stretch here of opening the Mirage on May 1st with Sarah Landry. And again, credit to the team, where on all areas of the team, the creative process that Billy has been leading, the programming process, where we have a world-class programming
Mm.
team led by Kenny Schechter, who's been able to. I mean, he's a legend in the industry. He was president of Webster Hall. He's been in the industry for 25 years. His ability to really drive great programming calendars. Jermaine Santiago, again, another legend in the space, who has operated, has been with, 4 or 5 legendary hospitality operators. We have a great team, and bringing that together and communicating to the
Mm.
fans, and then dropping these bonkers creative visions into the marketplace with our renders. And again, it's funny reading the fan feedback, and I do read the feedback. People say, no way this is going to get built. It's never going to happen. I'm like, well, again, going back to my constituents: capital, team, vendors, community, fans.
Yeah.
That's what I think about. And if I cover all those things, I can guarantee that we will get open on May 1st. We will open with the best in class, incredible music, artists, DJs, live bands, everything that we're doing. We're announcing on Wednesday the first ever residency in New York City of this particular artist that we'll announce. Um, People's mind will be blown when we announce it. I mean, it's just one hit after the other
Yep.
coming into this company. I'm personally very excited about it. I am honored to be a part of the team and on that journey with people.
Yeah. You mentioned experience. I want to transition into experience and just how much has shifted over the last 10 years. I actually used to DJ in New York. It was all about bottle service, real estate, all of that. Like, this is like a decade, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just my intuition and just my experiences as a fan or a customer of these types of venues. But I feel like there's a fundamental shift of, I think you mentioned it, wanting more space to dance, having more experiences with friends, connecting more and being less quote unquote digital. How are you guys embodying some of that with Brooklyn Mirage? I feel like that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I feel. People are like drinking less and complementing it with whatever it may be, mushrooms, whatever, and
yeah,
just the art of just being one with the music.
yeah,
How
absolutely.
how is that shifting the way you guys think about experience? And then I want to parlay that into more broader hospitality of connecting people, and we'll go there in a second. But
Yeah,
for Brooklyn Mirage specifically,
yeah. I look. I think what I'm proud about with the team, and as I mentioned earlier, I think it takes a diversified team to get it right. So I think we now have all the different component parts here. Brooklyn Mirage has always provided a best in class music production experience. I mean, I think it's unparalleled in the United States. Um, and Mirage has also moved with the times. I mean, the physical name Mirage, right, means
mm,
it appears, it disappears, it reappears in different visions. So it was designed by Billy to change constantly.
mm,
Um, that ability to change is really the core DNA of the company. And so as we look at Mirage 4.0, so this is the fourth iteration of Mirage, we've studied the market. And we, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of hospitality and music professionals on this team that have been doing this for a long time. Our view is that the market over the last couple of years absolutely has evolved, where people want a more connective experience. Thankfully, I think people are getting away from technology, like the whole holding up the phone. Sure, like everyone holds, I mean, I hold up a phone every now and then, like,
yeah,
but not the whole time, right? So I think people, it's almost like they pull their phone out and just for 30 seconds to get the memory, but they put it back in. Like, I think the phone is coming off the dance floor a lot, which is great, thank
that's
God.
awesome. Yeah.
And you're
Well,
seeing,
you guys won't do the stickers or anything.
we won't do the stickers. We've toyed around with having like with using the pouches,
Yeah.
and again, it's really DJ, it's
Per
artist.
per
It's
artist,
per
per
artist, because a lot
yeah.
of the artists still want
Yeah.
people to take the content, so it's an interesting like tension, because a lot of artists are like, yeah, I don't want phones, but then like, I sort of want a little bit of like,
Yeah.
organic social. So I personally would love to do a lot of phoneless experiences,
Yeah.
like, but let's see how it evolves. But I do think organically people are using their phone less. We've designed the venue to have a lot more flow within the venue. So that just comes down to pure architecture and engineering. The Mirage 3.0 was built on scaffolding, And this one is built on pre-engineered wood and steel structures, which opens the entire structure up. So you can move around and go up and down
Mm.
the structure in a much more efficient way. Many more areas to dance. So just the physical footprint
It's
of
way more dynamic.
it's way more
Yeah.
dynamic. Just the
Yeah.
physical footprint, the way we've designed the sight lines. Again, credit to Billy and the production team, like getting the sight lines right, trying to remove obstructions. Again, all these things when you're building from a prefabricated, 3D designed structure allows you to do that. So a lot of people don't realize that our constraints were actually like removed because we're designing and fabricating with wood and prefab steel. So I think that ability to dance, the ability to connect, and then acknowledging on the hospitality side that trends are changing, which is like no secret.
Yep.
I mean, it's out there, um, and again, designing for that. So, I don't think this is like the world's most innovative concept, but we are doing the first ever mocktail bar inside of a performance venue in the United States.
That's
It's
really
cool.
cool.
Like I don't think we're going to win, Fast Company Most
Sure.
Innovative of the Year as a result of that, but I do think that people will
Yeah.
value that, and
Absolutely.
we've gone in and looked at all the different experiences around the venue. Say, look, like a lot of people don't want to drink as much. We've looked at all the price points to say, hey, like let's bring the price points down so it's more affordable for GA younger people that are coming in. And then for the people that do want the VIP or the table service, and that still is a reality for a lot of people, we're going to be rolling out, especially on the table service side, non-alcoholic alternatives that, still, yes, of course, it's expensive for a table because we have to operate in an expensive venue. The DJs, obviously pull a big fee. Like we have to run a viable business. So when you have a table, you are paying for real estate, you're paying for, certain additional hospitality perks. But I think, I mean, I'm not sure if this is 100% correct, but I'm going to go on a limb here. I think we are the first venue in the United States to provide extensive non-alcoholic choices to the table service. So by way of
Yeah.
example, we're finalizing this, but and let's say that you want to be on the stage next to Black Coffee or Adriatic or one of those big like stage
Hmm.
oriented shows. The typical real estate kind of music, whatever it may be, like you will spend $25,000 to $50,000 for a table, and for any listener that doesn't believe me, you just go on the Coachella website, go on any of these
Yeah. I mean,
websites, like that's what it's going to
Art Basel, all
cost.
these places.
It's
It's
we're not
great.
any different. I mean, I hate to say it, but that part of the business is not a venue specific thing. It's
Yeah.
just how the industry operates.
The value shift is now more apparent though to the consumer. It's like you're not paying for the alcohol minimums.
Yeah,
You're paying
you're
for the
paying for the real estate,
experience and
but
the
for me, it's like just again, okay, as I said earlier, maybe putting myself in the customer data point is a dangerous thing, but like I know I physically don't want to drink to the point where I'm getting blackout
no.
drunk.
Yeah, I don't think most people
Like
are.
no people don't
Yeah.
want to do that.
Yeah.
So, if you're spending 10 grand, 25 grand on a table, wouldn't it be nice instead of having to spend that extra $3,000 on a bottle of Clase Azul? Hey, why don't we have a two or $3,000 Sprinter service lined up for you? Why don't we have merch lined up for you? That's all part of the
By
minimum
the way, that's
coming through.
brilliant.
Like
Those are the things you want.
I'd love
Yeah.
to do this. We haven't confirmed this yet, but we're working with a couple of wellness brands to actually give a recovery the next week. So it's like, hey,
That's
cold
actually
plunge,
that's phenomenal.
massages, like that's what I mean, again,
Got to work with Remedy Place
yeah, I
and
mean,
just
we are
yeah,
like we're
dude.
talking to a couple of these types of groups because wouldn't it be great? Like, yeah, you still have to spend, a certain amount of money, but like instead of like that extra bottle that you're not going to drink, or you're going to have a sip of it, like, hey, bring your 8 friends to,
Yeah.
Remedy Place or Williamsburg
Whatever.
Bathhouse,
Yeah.
and like the
Yeah.
next day have like a nice little hang session. Yes, you get like double hang
That's
session.
really see. This is what I love. Like
Like
that's very who cares wins.
yeah,
Like,
like
are you putting yourself in the shoes of the customer and
yeah.
their pre and post event experience?
Yeah, it's all about bonding. Like
Yeah.
we want people like when you come to the Mirage, like of course, obviously, a lot of it, the decision making is around the act that's up on the stage. Like
Yeah.
we get that, we understand that, but there is this thing called the Mirage effect, where previously, especially back 5 6 years ago, and right after COVID when they reopened in 2022, like this concept of like extra people coming just because it's the Mirage, not because a certain DJ is up on the stage. And I think that Mirage effect is coming back. Like we're seeing it in the trends of how we're selling the tickets right now.
Yeah. You want to go experience the
You just want to
venue.
go experience the
Yeah.
venue. And if we can do that where people come in, whether you're spending, $45, $40, $55 for a GA ticket, or $125, $150 for VIP, or you're buying a table for anywhere from, call it 2 grand up to 10 grand, you should walk away with a memory and new friends that you remember for a long time. And
Yeah.
so if we can provide services at different levels where, again, I think the reason why, honestly, when I was interviewing for this job, I'm like, this my life experience fits this job. Generator, where I
Yes.
was running the world's largest design-driven millennial or Gen
Community.
Z
Yeah.
community. I mean, we
Yeah.
had 3 million guests a year, age 18 to 28. I was the first person to bring Boiler Room actually on the road into a hotel back in
So
2011
cool.
in Berlin. I mean, I didn't know that Boiler Room would
Be
become
this
Boiler
big.
Room,
Yeah.
but playing at that level where we're giving something really great to people who, perhaps are younger and don't have as thick of a wallet because they're just starting out, and respecting that and nurturing that, all the way up to, that person who's a big CEO, or, has a lot of money and says, I want to be on the stage next to whatever performer.
Mm.
We want to be able to give that hospitality community something for everyone, but also with a firm point of view, and I think really doubling down on all that is something
Yeah.
we're really focused on.
I love that experiential piece. I'm stuck on that mentally because I feel like that no one is doing that or thinking about it as deeply and as authentically as you guys. But that being said, the last topic I want to really touch on is kind of zooming out again. And whether this is a long chapter for you or a short chapter, I think undoubtedly hospitality is changing, even in the hotel scene and just broadly, right, globally. I'm curious in playing with this thought in my head, which is these members clubs, right? They're so omnipresent now.
Yes, they are.
Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. I personally love the experience of the few that I've kind of been a part of or um, been able to experience as a guest. One of the most impactful experiences I had was actually in Milan, where I stayed at Casa Cipriani Milan,
Hmm.
and I think I've may even talked about this before, but there was a sense of care because it was a boutique hotel of like 15 to 20 rooms, where you felt like entering the hotel was entering the experience versus entering the room started the experience. And I feel like that concept of coming in and feeling like everyone is a part of that one home really curates connection correctly. Where if I'm sitting down and having a coffee in the morning, I don't feel this distance between me and you energetically because they've done something there, whether they've made you feel so comfortable through the micro moments of understanding who you are and talking to you and making you feel welcome, or because maybe it's just, a 20-person hotel. I don't know the answer, but I feel like that feeling I was left with, where I felt like the living room was a shared experience, the wellness room was a shared experience,
Absolutely.
the cocktail lounge was a shared experience. I believe that that humans want to go that way as AI and tech become so omnipresent and more of the like blocking and tackling of hospitality. But I'd love your thoughts on where is this going in the next 5 to 10 years? How are you seeing people travel in multi-income levels, and what excites you and inspires you as you think about the next chapter of hospitality?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I mean, member clubs have been a sort of a core focus of my career really since I got involved with NeueHouse, and then between NeueHouse and the Mirage, I took a year and a half off or so, really focus on my family and my kids. And I was doing consulting, which was very fulfilling actually, because again, it allowed me to learn and like to be involved with different types of really interesting people. And your question really sort of highlights a couple experiences I had while I was consulting. So one of my clients was a group called Woodhouse, which runs Park House in Dallas and Houston, and they run the Moore down in Miami. So membership club platform. I was helping the founder and CEO Brady Wood. Again, another just fantastic, unique, interesting individual who's charismatic and a great mentor, and just a great someone I learned from. I'd always
Hmm.
listen to him and learn from him. Again, that narrative, like putting myself in the mix of people that make me better, right, and that sort of forced me to think in a new and different way. Um, the more is an example to your point, like Casa Cipriani in Miami, where they have a hotel. They have a small hotel. I think it's like 13, 14 keys. They have a workspace similar to NeueHouse in some respects. They have a great members club. They have a public restaurant. They have a wellness space, and they have tons of events. I think they have something, I don't know, like 500 events a year. And if you look at it, and there's tons of other membership clubs coming up in Miami, but most of those other membership clubs in Miami or the ones opening in New York uh, uh, are sort of one-trick ponies, right? It's like a great restaurant
Yeah.
or basically a nightclub with like a little bit of food, or in reverse, a great restaurant with like a little cool
Yep.
nightclub. I think the membership clubs that are really going, Casa Cipriani is one, the Moore is another one, and there's probably 4 or 5 other examples out there where you have this multi-hyphenate experience where you walk in and you can really spend 12 hours of your day
Hmm.
or 24 hours if you're staying there, and you can feel connected. I do think we are living in an age, and maybe it's getting a little bit better, but the pandemic was an extremely lonely time. And technology, to my point about people using phones maybe a little bit less at the concerts or at the Mirage,
Hmm.
hopefully we're going maybe more to a more connected thing. I mean, it's interesting. AI maybe perversely is bringing us closer together. I'm not sure, but I know that over, again, as I mentioned, I'm 51. Like I've seen this erosion of community in the last 30, 40 years. Like we used to have, different religious, like
Yeah.
people went to church or went to temple uh, a lot more. People had a lot more sort of community-based activities that they used to go
Especially
to
local on the local
on the
level.
local
Most of
level, like,
these.
but
Yeah.
even like the scouts, like all the, I was an Eagle Scout back
Yeah.
in my day. It was like that was a really tight knit group of people. Like you don't see that as much. It's eroded, and then you layer on the pandemic, and it's like just another erosion. And so these hospitality communities that are popping up, whether it's a paid community, a paid membership community, based on some of the examples we've discussed, or an unpaid community, meaning like the Mirage in and of itself is actually very much a community. Like if you
Mm.
go online and then you see people showing up, and I mean, I have people writing me all the time. They DM me and they're like, I'm so happy to be. Thank you for opening up the Mirage. I'm so happy to be here because my tribe is here. I think
Mhm.
people are desperate to get that connection, and I think they are getting sick of their phones. Thank God. So more to that, give me more of that. Give me more of that in-person connection. Again, whether you have to pay for it because you trust that brand to curate. I mean, we're sitting in WSA here, incredible curation in their sister membership club, which is right adjacent to Avant Gardner and Mirage. It's called SAA. Brilliant membership community, like multi-hyphenate. It's bringing people together.
Mhm.
Yes, you have to pay for that, but think about it. 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 10 years ago, you go to church,
You're donating all
that
your
you
money to
donate.
the
It's the
church,
same
I was gonna
thing.
say.
It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're not paying a membership, but
Yeah,
like
yeah.
every week, they pass the tray. It's sort of the same thing, right? Like you have to, whether you're from a charitable perspective or from a for-profit perspective, you're entrusting your money to someone or an organization that you hope curates a connection. And all I can say to that is like, as a consumer, like give your money or your time to people or companies that you believe in and that seem to have the same type of moral
Mm.
compass and same type of authenticity that you bring to the table. And if that's your tribe, like join that tribe and support it, support it with your time, support it with your money. I think that's a deeply important thing. And then one final point I'll note, another group that I had the privilege to work with again, to learn from and consult with, was Chip Conley, who I worked with last year just briefly to help them bid on Modern Elder Academy. Again, another community. It's not a membership per se, but what Chip Conley has done, he's a legend in the hospitality space, but his ability to bring together community at a different age group. Modern Elder Academy is about what
Mm.
happens when you're after 50 or after 45, let's say. It's not really age dependent, but it's a mindset. Like, what's that next step in your life? Just because you're retired or just because you're thinking about retiring, that doesn't mean that
Well,
you're
community is almost more important
this
then.
community is more
That
important,
keeps my
right?
my
And
my folks, it's keeping them alive,
absolutely.
right? Like,
So
just
I just
continue.
think community evolves, and I think you got to put your trust in those people. Again, Chip is a legend. I've been fortunate enough to spend time with him and work for him a little bit, where he's brought together this great sense of community. Um, that's who I would support. People that really are just totally bought into it and really live their brand and have really brought together again the constituencies of capital, consumers or guests, employees, community, and culture. I mean, and
Yeah.
bringing all that together is really important.
That's a great way to sort of end, and probably one of my final questions here too. But what you just described is kind of the thesis of magnetic to, and why I care so much about speaking to people like you is because you've built a magnet in between that. You're constantly attracting those communities within themselves to come together to build something, more powerful. As a CEO and leader of not only what you've done, but I'm sure you'll go on to do many more chapters, what do you draw inspiration from? Where do you draw inspiration from? I mean, you've seen so much. To stay curious at your level must be just harder with all the experiences you've had and so much more knowledge and, lessons. How do you continue to draw inspiration and become that magnet where, you can continue to go on and build amazing new venues and
Yeah,
accomplishments?
I mean, I'm inspired by people who are pushing the boundaries of their respective industries. There is creativity in anything, really, if you think about it. It's funny. I mean, I was at an event maybe a week or two ago, and I was talking to someone. I'm like, oh, what do you do? And he's like, I'm boring. I'm in tech. I'm like, why would you answer the question
Yeah.
that way? Like
No, by
that's
the way, that is my
like
big irk and pet peeve too.
like
It's
why
like,
would you answer? I'm like, do you know how much creativity there
yeah,
is in
yeah,
technology right now? Like, go out. I told I'm like, look, I don't really know you that well, but I need to coach you a bit
yeah.
here. Like, you need to stop thinking that way,
Yeah.
because every moment in whatever industry you're in can be a source of creativity. So, in my one of my previous roles with Photographiska, I had I was learning about photography. I mean, I didn't know that much about it, and I took on that company's CEO and really again took it through a turnaround when I put together NeueHouse. I had the privilege of meeting Ellen von Unworth and became friendly with her, and I had breakfast with her a couple weeks ago. She's the best at what she does. She's just so explosively creative. And I'm like, I just want to be around that. I want to be around people that are really at the top level of what they're doing in their field, no matter what their field is,
Mm-hmm.
because that is, to your point, that is magnetic. That is creating some type of connection and magnetic interaction that you can walk away and really learn from. So
Yeah.
I think that ability to constantly put myself and the companies that I work with in that
In those
position to
ecosystems.
attract,
Yeah.
to have that vibrational frequency of attraction. Um, that's how I like to lead my life for the next however many years.
Yeah. Dude, I really appreciate this conversation, man.
Likewise.
It was
Yeah.
phenomenal
No, it was
and great
great.
to get a
Thank you
peek
so
into your
much.
brain and how you think about all
I
this.
appreciate it.
Yeah, and
It's
I'm
great.
sure you're busy. 5.5 weeks,
Oh yeah.
winds, rains, cranes.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
easy.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely for all those listening who doubt the construction timeline. It is tight, but we will be open on time. So
I love it, man. Thank you.
great.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
brother.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Thank
That
you
was
so
great.
much, man.
Yeah, that was awesome.